Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie discussion in the multiverse. I'm your host, Adam Porters, and I'm joined by sweet Sean Kovacs from the internet.
What are you watching?
And of course, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear, and this week I'm dubbed, not subbed.
Oh, please, no! We want to read all of the words that Bruce Leslie has to say because sometimes we can't understand them, but that's okay. That's what we're here for. And it is that time, everybody. And this time, it's the second time within this month that we are leaning on our folks over at patreon.com/HMP. There you get the pre-show, post-show, and of course, Dinger Zone. And this week is the second time in this month, because there's 5 Mondays in it, that we are giving you guys the reins here, man, and saying you get to vote on what we watch. And here were the selections they had to choose from. We have Supervised on Hulu, which looks awful, and I feel like at some point we're definitely going to hit that up because it looks super bad, or at least the picture has. I didn't even watch the trailer. Return of Swamp Thing, The Fountain, but today, by a pretty overwhelming majority, they have decided that we shall watch Akira from 1988, I believe. Yes, 88. Yeah. Akira, there's probably going to be 18,000 different pronunciations within this whole show, so, don't get on us for it. We're just a bunch of white guys. We can't help it.
I think people pick this stuff on purpose just to hear me mangle names in the Comic Connection.
Oh, that's going to be the best part, I think. I'm sitting back ready to go. But that also in the Stallone connection at the end, whenever something like this pops up, I'm like, poor Sean. Anyways, but I think they do that just to see the man do the magic that he does. And I think he's got something in store for us today.
I knew I forgot something.
Oh, darn it. Sylvester Stallone, surely enough, has been to Japan at some point in his life. Thank you very much, and goodbye, everybody. But again, I want to say a big thank you to everybody, patreon.com/HMP, all that kind of good stuff. And let's just get it going, man. I figure we got a lot to talk about with this one. Here is the trailer for Akira.
All right. The story is you and your friends went out at night on your bikes to visit your dying mother, and then another bunch of other biker hooligans called the Clowns attacked you. They hurt your friend, you lost your temper, and that's why 8 of these clowns are all now in the hospital. And that is the truth.
What?
Just hang on. He's really hurt bad.
Who are those kids?
They seem to be an ordinary bike gang, sir. Tetsuo! Hey, wait! You can't take them away like...
It was a dream that I saw. You mustn't let that boy go. The city will crumble. So many people, so many will die. We get to meet Akira again.
Akira? When will it happen?
Kaneda, we're not back in school anymore.
Now you're king of the mountain, aren't you? But it's all garbage!
Neo Tokyo is going to change soon. We aren't the ones who will change it. Wait for the wind called Akira.
You've got to return to the laboratory. Listen to me.
It's my brain! What have you done?
That which is called science reverses knowledge. That which is called civilization devastates the spirit of man.
You changed my friend, didn't you?
Your friend has made his choice.
We have every indication that Akira is about to manifest itself.
The moment of Lord Akira's awakening is drawing closer. The time of atonement is upon us. Are your hearts prepared? The time is nigh.
Kaneda! Tetsuo!
Alrighty, that was the trailer for Akira from 1988. You know what time it is.
It's time for Bruce's Comic Book Connection.
Bruce, what do we got this week?
Akira. I think I might have come close there.
That's
Akira
pretty close. I like that.
is a manga series written and drawn by Okay, guys, I got to get a breath here. Katsuhiro Otomo.
You might need to go to the bathroom, I think.
The story ran for 8 years from 1982 to 1990 and is considered an important piece of work in the cyberpunk genre. I was surprised to discover it was published in the United States by Marvel via the Epic Comics imprint. In fact, Akira was among the very first manga to be translated into English, and for all I know, it was the first one that didn't involve an adult woman dressed in a school uniform and a giant squid. Now, similar to the film, Kaneda is the primary protagonist of the comics. He's a brash, carefree delinquent and the leader of a motorcycle gang. Kaneda is best friends with Tetsuo, a member who he has known since childhood. But their friendship was ruined after Tetsuo gained and abused his psychic powers. Prior to creating Akira, Otomo had turned the manga world on its ear with a story called Fireball, in which he disregarded accepted manga art styles and which established his interest in science fiction as a setting. Fireball went unfinished, but a number of plot elements seemed to be carried over to Akira. For example, both stories include young freedom fighters trying to rescue one of the group's members who was being used by the government in psychic experiments, with said character eventually unleashing a destructive energy. Perhaps part of what led to Akira's popularity in the West was that its creator took it upon himself to arrange it left to right with his own hands rather than leave it in either its original format or up to a publisher to flip. He also colored the art rather than release it in black and white as it had been in Japan, and as a bit of trivia, it may have been the first digitally colored comic book ever, kind of fitting for a cyberpunk story. Even though there is a superpower telekinetic in the story, critics claim the reason for the story's success is that at its core, it's about character, societal pressures, and political machinations. Motifs in Akira have become commonplace in manga and anime, which include youth alienation, government corruption and inefficiency, and a military grounded in old-fashioned Japanese honor, displeased with the compromises of modern society. Once the manga was complete, it contained 2,000 pages of story and ran until 2 years after the release of the film. So obviously it will contain elements absent in the film, and its sales are in the millions. The gross sales are probably around $400 million, which is pretty impressive. However, despite being a #1 bestseller in Japan, I think the story's legacy really is defined by the movie it inspired. The film Akira is regarded by many critics as a landmark anime film, one that influenced much of the art in the anime world that followed its release. HMP favorite anime reviewer Bamboo Dong says the limited edition's DVD is superbly translated. And the only thing that really adds is an excuse for me to quote Bamboo Dong for the third time in HMP history. So there you go. HMP tested and Bamboo Dog approved Akira.
I got to say, after watching this, that 4K Blu-ray looks quite enticing to me. Now, here's the IMDb plotline for those of you that may not know. A secret military project endangers Neo Tokyo when it turns a biker gang member into a rampaging psychic psychopath who can only be stopped by 2 teenagers and a group of psychics. And it's directed by the same guy who actually wrote the comic, which is pretty darn strange. It doesn't happen too often there.
That is strange, yeah. But he did go on to work predominantly in film after this. He kind of left manga.
Yeah, and there's a long history of this being trying to be adapted into live action. We'll talk about that later, I'm sure. But I think if HMPers out there were to place some bets and stuff, I don't think. Well, I'll put it to you this way, Bruce. Had you seen this before?
No,
I hadn't either. I don't think anyone would have said the only person on this crew to have actually seen this before was you, Sean.
That's right, buddy.
Unbelievable.
I've not only seen this movie, I own it in multiple formats.
Wow.
This was a transgressive movie for me. I got it on VHS when I was still in high school. It basically changed my life, this movie, because it's the first movie I had seen where I was like, hey guys, I think I'm pretty smart and artsy. Like when I first saw this movie. It was, it's like the best way I could possibly describe it to you as a kid, like watching this for the first time and having no frame of reference. I mean, yes, I'd seen Voltron and like Robotech and stuff like that, but that is so different than Akira, that when Akira, like even people who liked Voltron and Robotech and even Battle of the Planets at that point, it was like 50-50 whether or not you were going to like Akira, because the best way to describe it is beautiful trash. Like it's just the grossest looking, most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life, this movie. And so when I saw it and I got it instantly, like I didn't understand all of it, but I understood what they were trying to say, like the whole thing's an allegory for nuclear armament and all this stuff. Like I understood all of those things. And it really opened up a world to me, not necessarily anime, but a world of like, oh, people who make movies are trying to say stuff sometimes. And this is really the first movie that I felt like that. And I was probably 14 or 15 when I saw it. And so this movie in particular, and I know it's so surprising because I'm the guy who hates animation. I don't hate animation. I hate bad animation. And this is definitely not that. I understand that this is not everyone's cup of tea, nor should it be. It was not made for that. It is made for people who are looking for something new and different. And when you are the artsy fartsy kid in a town full of people who are ready to work at the plant, this is your movie. And this was definitely mine.
And I know that lists aren't everything, but as far as anime that's going to have universal appeal, this is probably going to be the closest to it, because every list that I looked at has this right up there with Spirited Away as the best examples of Japanese animation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I also think some of those things. Well, I don't know how far up that list that would be for like for new people, for like really accessible stuff, because I don't know if this is the most accessible kind of movie, because it's very different. It is out there. Like the second half is probably not amazingly strong, and then the third half just goes absolute bananas, and you're either on board or you're not.
The fact that it has 3 halves says a lot about it.
And not only that, but it's also this side of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the most screaming movie ever. Everyone's always screaming. It's the loudest thing you've ever heard in your life.
And I would say it's about as accessible as any cyberpunk thing is.
It is, although, I was very surprised to hear this, is that because I watched a documentary this week in prepping for this about Akira, and how the folks who were part of the Akira group, I think is the name of it. And it's like a bunch of, because it cost $10 million to make this movie. And so they have a lot of like corporate money getting slushed into this big fund to make Akira. And those corporations really thought that this had a gigantic chance of making it in the West, just because I guess to folks in the East, this is very both things, East and West. But when I watch this, I don't think West at all. To me, this just feels like the most Japanese thing that's ever been made. And so when it hits the shores here, it does not do very well till it gets to video.
Yeah. And I can kind of maybe see where they're coming from, because it's got the whole motorcycle gang aspect to it. So perhaps someone in the East, you're looking at what's popular in the 80s in the US and North America in particular. You think, well, the motorcycles are going to bring them in. Yeah. Kids love that James Dean fellow.
There's always kind of like a slight Western undertone in some ways. Instead of horses, we're riding bikes, and there's warring factions and stuff like that. So there could be some of that thought in there as well. But I remember I had friends that were like super anime heads when I was in, middle school and high school and stuff. And these guys, I caught on board on some of it. I watched your like Ninja Scrolls and Ghost in the Shell and Vampire Hunter D and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, Akira was not one that popped for me personally. I guess I got like a handful of things that I'm like, all right, it's well enough. And then, some people kind of grasp on towards that and then kind of go off into bigger and better things. I did that with blaxploitation films. My friends, we all watched a couple, and then I ended up watching a whole bunch of others. And I think anime was a lot of that same way too. It's like if you grasped onto it and that was something that you dug, you dove in, head first into that giant pool. And right around in the 90s, that's when things really started blowing up for anime, and you could get all types of stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of that's thanks to Toonami. The thing, was it Cartoon Network that did that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. Although for me, it pushed me into watching movies that I wouldn't necessarily have seen in the first place. I think the reason why that I've become a movie head has a lot to do with Akira, quite honestly, because this is something that I knew the second that I started watching it, like half of the world, half of my American world would only see this as screaming, yelling pictures. Like that's what this would look like to a lot of people. And when we introed the show here, that what are you watching? That is, I have heard that term, that question said to me the most while watching Akira. It is the movie that the most people ever have said, what are you watching? Because it's so loud and it's so crazy. And if you see it at the wrong time, you just see a boy turning into a veiny, fleshy mess and encompassing everything around him. And people are like, what is this?
And that's when it started to win me back over, because like the movie started and I really did like kind of the motorcycle gang, the rudderless young adults out on the street. I mean, I do think that has some Western appeal and a kind of storytelling I like, especially in a dystopian setting. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of getting into that. And then in that middle act, I started to have a thing that happens to me a lot with animation, not just Japanese animation, but I start to have this thing where suddenly I feel like I don't really know what's going on, or I'm not as invested, but then it pulls me back in at the end when it becomes pretty clear what's going on.
Well, this is also an exceptionally difficult plot to follow. And so, you start learning things about this movie upon more viewings, because I mean, I wouldn't have understood it all. I couldn't have possibly understood it all when I was 14 or 15. But like, especially the way we passively watch things these days, people have multiple screens going. For me, I'm doing 15 other things while something's on TV. And you can't do that with this movie, because you're going to miss, especially as subtle as some of this is. Like, I only probably 5-10 years ago figured out that, and I'm always going to call him Kaneda. I'm sorry. That's what they called him the first time I saw this movie, but I'll try my best. Kaneda. When you learn that I'm sorry, not Kaneda, Tetsuo. When you first learn that Tetsuo's power is basically the inverse of Akira, I didn't catch that, and I'd probably seen the movie 10 times before the first time that I caught that he is the opposite thing that Akira had. And so when you learn stuff, like, and it's one of those things where it's very subtle, but when you hear the doctor speaking and he's like, oh, that's interesting, and I can't remember his exact verbiage, but he says something along the lines of his power set is the same as Akira's, it's just inversed, or something along those lines. And I was like, oh, huh. So I guess that Tetsuo is the second coming of Akira, which is why all of those cult members are like, Akira's coming back, which I'd never understood previously.
Yeah, and I think part of, at least from a video that I saw, because I ended this and I immediately wanted to kind of know more. So I've delved into like a couple of video essays on YouTube and everything. Like Bruce was saying in the Comic Book Connection, this is like 6 giant books all together. And from what I'm to understand, it's like the first half of the first book and then the last half of the last book.
No, the last book hadn't been written yet.
Well, I meant as far as like the theme, I guess.
And because Otomo was involved with the movie, perhaps it actually was in the movie and then the books followed that course. I don't know, because I haven't read the books, but yeah, the movie was was released before the story was finished in the manga.
And apparently there's a lot of stuff that's in the middle, that's in that second act and stuff, that if you read the books, you'll get so much more out of it, because it's just little tiny snippets of so much stuff that's going on that you could never even get into. Characters that have like, a minute and a half of screen time, have large giant arcs within the books themselves. And, and honestly, as huge and gigantic of an undertaking as that book series is, this movie intrigued me to, kind of at least seek out at least the first, volume of it, because I'd never really seen anything quite like this before, and I couldn't imagine what this was like, in 1988. Especially having all the other anime and stuff that was previous to this. This is kind of like that, but not really like it at the same time, from what I'm to understand.
I had no idea what was going to happen in this movie. I mean, I've seen a thousand. Akira, as we pronounce it oftentimes, but I've seen 1,000 Akira t-shirts with the cool motorcycle and with Kaneda sitting on it. And I thought, okay, it's going to be some kind of action movie with the motorcycle people, like maybe Speed Racer on motorbikes. And then I knew I was in for something altogether different when I see a toddler that looks like Solomon Grundy just show up out of nowhere.
And the Grundy kids. Yes. Grundy babies.
I'd watch that show.
I like that idea.
But yeah, seeing the little kid, and the best part about it, because it's what intrigues you to kind of keep watching, is that, like Sean said, they don't spoon feed you anything. You really only start to kind of learn what this whole world is about in the second act. And really even into the third act.
Yeah.
To where you finally go, oh, I understand where this is going, because the kids at the beginning and stuff, they don't really tell you anything about it. It's very just like, figure it out when we tell you to figure it out.
A lot of this can just be on me and me being slow on the uptake, and I've only seen the movie once, and maybe it'd make more sense if I watched it more times like Sean has. But if the scientist in the movie hadn't said that what Tetsuo was doing was the Big Bang, I wouldn't have known that he was a creative force as opposed to the destructive force that Akira had.
Right.
So yeah, that whole point that you made there, Sean, about them being opposites, even though I kind of caught that he was creating the Big Bang, I didn't make that I didn't make that immediate connection that maybe I should have, that they're opposite forces of equal magnitude.
Yeah. But I mean, geez, Bruce, I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. 30, 35, 40 times. I couldn't even tell you, but it's one of those things where, if, like I said earlier, if you're just passively watching it, you're not going to get it all. And I don't watch Akira as a mystery box show. It's just something where, I grew up with it. So I just love it. And I just love the aesthetic of it. I love everything about it, quite honestly. And it's a mood. This movie is a mood. And if, it's one of those, this is one of those movies, much like Blade Runner to me. And I know that, we're talking about cyberpunk stuff, so it's kind of close.
Yeah.
Where, because of the way that it's drawn out, that I will fall asleep. I can fall asleep to this. I can fall asleep to Blade Runner. It happens a lot, quite honestly. It doesn't mean I don't love it. I do. I love both things. But it is one of those movies where, it just washes over me, and it makes me feel good while I'm watching it, even though it is so dark.
It's all the horrible things almost all of the time.
Right.
It definitely is nightmare fuel for me. I mean, just some of the imagery and stuff is definitely nightmare fuel, with the Solomon Grundy kids and then the big fleshy bulb at the end.
Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, and I don't remember this far back anymore, but it definitely wasn't my first viewing. When I figured out that it was Akira that had set off the explosion, and that Japan had mistaken it as a nuclear explosion from a foreign enemy, and that's why there's Neo Tokyo, and that's why things are the way they are. Like, once you put those puzzle pieces together, it makes you feel really smart as a dumb kid, where you're like, oh, wow, that's a really interesting thing. And I can't believe they put it in this movie that, that clearly is not for children, but it's when you're 13 and you have nothing around you to go, oh, well, this is for adults. Like there's no cartoons for adults in the late 80s, but there was Akira. And so this was really my first introduction into anything like this.
Yeah, and this is one of those things that, like, I feel like it's definitely one of those that you're gonna I will find in rewatches, and that's what I said. I'm definitely gonna buy that 4K Blu-ray because I want to go and watch this again because there is so much stuff, and really when you even go and look at so much of the animation, let's just talk about when that group they finally come out of school and everything, and there's like 8 people on there, and they are all doing something and something very different and something very specific. And this movie, the animation is unbelievable. I mean, especially when you think that this is 1988, there's some stuff in here when they're going through the tunnels and stuff that like you would swear up and down was like assisted with CGI. But it's all hand drawn in most of the cases, almost 24 frames a second for the majority of it. It's pretty astounding.
Yeah, I mean, it's just impressive for Cell Animation to pull this off.
Well, they had so many people working on this project.
I just picture one poor guy in an office drawing nonstop for 3 years.
Well, as much as I want to think it's just little Japanese men smoking, that's not really what it was. But
there were a couple ladies there too.
The movement of these characters, the movement of the bikes, the movement of everything. But on top of that, there's the artwork, deep backgrounds where like blink, you miss it kind of stuff, like there's so much happening. It's such a deep, rich movie. It kind of ruins you a little bit. After you watch Akira, try, when you're 14 years old, after you watch Akira, try watching something like Voltron. Like it's impossible.
Yeah.
So these 4 primary colors that they just keep moving, and it's super boring. Nothing's going on in this. Look at that plain background.
It's basically the difference between Looney Tunes in the 40s and Looney Tunes in the 70s. I mean, it's night and day.
I mean, even more difficult would be like watching this on VHS, and then the next day the family goes to see Beauty and the Beast or a Disney fair, where there's no subtext. Everything's pretty much on the nose and straight through, and the story before you see the movie, usually with Disney stuff.
It's true.
Well, yeah, I mean, because they're just like, oh, this is public domain. Well, it's ours now. And they do a good job with it, but, it is. It's very kind of paint by numbers and stories and stuff that you already know. And I think most people that, haven't even seen this, like you said, Bruce, you see the poster, you see the bike, you see the guy, you see Akira, you're like, well, that's Akira, clearly. Why else would they say that's the name and put the guy on the cover? That's clearly that. And then like 2 seconds into the movie, you're like, all right, so that's not his name. Is that like going to be a title or something? So there's always this like intriguing little nugget that's on the way with this movie.
I don't even know if the name Akira is traditionally assigned to one gender identity or the other, but I always assumed Akira was like a lady's name, but they make it pretty clear it's a guy, right?
I thought
so. Yes, it is.
So I'm definitely culturally out of touch there. I was like, oh, maybe that, he meets Kay, and I think, okay, maybe Kay is short for Akira and she's Akira, but slowly I started to realize, oh, maybe that's not a girl's name.
And you kind of feel like you know who the characters are and like what their arc is going to kind of be. You think Tetsuo is just kind of this numbskull, backup friend who's always just kind of getting into trouble. And but it turns quickly, but it turns very fast.
As soon as he pops on screen, I know a guy with a forehead like that is destined to be a villain. I mean, he's got a melon if ever there's a melon. But I would say I was wrong in calling him a villain. But as soon as I see him, I'm like, okay, he's going to be the bad guy at the end of this.
That's a Dragon Ball Z hairline right there, boy.
Yes, exactly, man. It's probably in Dragon Ball Z because of this character.
I would not be surprised at that.
And, I'd seen statues, too, of Tetsuo with his little red cape tied around his neck and the white T-shirt that we get at the end of the movie. So I kind of was a little familiar with that image, but I probably would have told you if pressed that came from like Dragon Ball Z or something. I wouldn't have known it was from Akira.
The soundtrack is kind of nuts and insane. It is like it's like the 80s kind of synth poppy sort of thing with traditional, like, Asian music in there as well. It's
the best.
all over the place in the best of ways.
It's so good.
He could have used a little Chemical Brothers.
Can I say this though? I'm sorry. I gotta gripe a little bit because it's always there. Hulu, for the love of all that's holy, man, can you guys put 5.1 in any of your stuff? It's all stereo. We are in the 21st century, my dudes. Put that in 5.1. You're making me sad.
I watched it on my Apple Watch, so it was fun.
I ought to punch you right in the face. That's how they want you to watch the Snyder Cut, is on your Apple Watch. It's perfectly square, so it fits. Sorry.
I've done some tinkering to my Game Boy Advance that I watched it on that.
It's the Pocket, so it's slimmer and only runs on the double or triple A's, so it's better.
Oh, man.
You guys have never seen this before. You know the iconography of this movie. What surprised you about it?
I'll let you go first, Adam.
One of the things that surprised me that I thought was super cool was all of just the Tetsuo mental stuff, all him having these kind of waking nightmares. I like when he's on the street there and he's not sure what's happening to him, and as far as he's concerned, the ground is splitting and he's about to fall in. His guts are falling out of his chest and everything, and he's trying to put him back in. He's just having these crazy waking nightmares, and when he's in the room there and all the stuff comes together and there's this bear over him, just oh my gosh, it was just so cool, and I love that, and something I certainly was not expecting.
So I know that you guys briefly touched upon this, but did you understand before going into it that Akira was already dead? Like you were never going to see Akira?
Oh, no way. I was still expecting, when they went to the stadium to dig Akira up, I was still expecting at the very least, like an intact body. I wasn't expecting jars with labeled optic nerve, cranial nerve, which the optic nerve is a cranial nerve. We won't get into that. But I did not expect a series of jars.
He's like Damian Wayne right there. I'm already knocking you down to the middle part just on account that you got that wrong. Shows what you know, cartoon.
And interesting that, the version I watched, those are labeled in English. I wonder if they were labeled in English to give it a little Western flair from the get-go.
From what I remember, man, it's been forever since I watched that VHS, because I watched the first, their first foray of making Akira into something that the West will watch. I can't remember with the canister specifically, but I do know that there is a lot of English stuff around on that in the movie. Just very specifically, like when you think of the fact that Canada has the U.S. Air Force sticker on his bike.
Yeah, and it's got other, man, I can't remember all the other stickers now, but they're all kind of like, I think it might have like a Canon sticker where it's a Japanese company, but it's the English language logo.
Yeah.
Well, it's like all the white kids that put Japanese kana on themselves all over the place, and they don't know what it means.
Sure, they're all walking around with pork young fat on their shirt or whatever.
Yeah,
but the creator Otomo, though, from the beginning wanted this to find Western success because, like I said, $400 million is a lot of money for a comic book to gross. So he had planned on marketing the manga in the West pretty much from the get-go, and it would you could imagine that the transitive property would say he planned for this film to be shown in North America when he was creating it, so maybe some of those elements were there as well.
Perhaps. I love the ending is just absolutely bug nuts insane. I like, you think, oh, I feel like this, I know where this is going. And then it just keeps going up and up and up. You think you're at the rev limiter and you are not. You are not even close. And it just keeps going. And it becomes something that you can't take your eyes off of. And Sean's right. It is that very beautiful ugly on screen because it's so gross and it's just so over the top and strange. But you can't help but watch and go what insane thing are they going to do next? And then you're wowed by the next insane thing they do.
You ready for me to blow your mind, Adam?
Alrighty.
Wabi Sabi. You know, the beauty and the imperfection, the beauty and ugliness. I think that's a Japanese thing.
I'll take that. Why not?
It's the thing. What you're talking about is like you'll break something and then you put it back together with the gold paint, where like you'll break a bowl and then you put it back to, you know what it's like? It's like Kylo Ren's helmet in the third movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where instead of the red lines, it's gold.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, like it's like the mask itself was cool to begin with, and then when it came together with all the red glow and stuff, it's like, oh man, you made something cool even cooler. How'd you pull that one off?
Yeah. It's like any battle damaged toy. Just give it to your kids for a month. You got a battle damaged toy. Don't pay extra for that.
Yeah, we played with a lot of battle damaged toys when we were kids. Smash. That G.I. Joe's perfect now. Don't worry.
So, you know, there's a little bit of humor in this, especially at the beginning. And it never fails to make me laugh when Kaneda says to the one police officer, he goes, "Out of my way, old man." And he goes, I'm 25.
I love that. Yeah, I'm not even married yet.
How dare you?
There's little bits like that at the beginning. I mean, you know, by the end it's so darkly serious, but in the beginning specifically, they have those little moments, and you know, there's absolutely no way for me to see this movie and with any other kind of context, you know, like it is so specifically ingrained in my head. Like I know exactly where I was the first time I saw this movie. And so I went on to IMDb user reviews to see like what people would say about this movie that was bad. And it's basically what you would think, you know, like there's the people who don't understand it. There's the people who say they understand it, but don't. Then you have the guys who are like, you know, with the fedora and, you know, oh, hello, my lady, you know, like those guys who are like,
let me tell you something about this movie.
The guys who are like, look, I'm a huge anime guy, and this is awful. I don't see what the big deal is.
Oh,
you know?
man.
Like I love Evangelion, but I don't understand why everyone says this is such a great movie. Really, you don't understand it, dude. Like you can't understand why this beautiful piece of literature and this beautiful movie are so widely seen as an amazing feat of humans. Like, how do you not see that, dude?
You know that guy likes Sailor Moon just a little too much.
Of course. Of course.
Now, one of the things that I saw in this YouTube video where they showed a lot of stuff from the comics, and it really makes you appreciate what they're doing here in this movie in as much as they do it so much, is there's so much art that is in the books that has like no dialogue. It's just panel, or even these double spread panels and stuff for double page and whatnot. And it is gorgeous. The amount of work that was done in this book that is just to show this giant cityscape and all of the destruction and everything that was going on. It is astounding how much of that they captured for this movie. But like what you see in the book is even beyond. And like to me, the amount of like material that's there is overwhelming, but boy do I want to check it out, because if you like what you see here, from what I've seen of, you know, some panels in the comics and stuff, man, does it get even crazier there.
Yeah, and that's kind of par for the course with, you know, manga anime comparisons.
And, you know, it's tough to, I guess the nice part about, you know, the live action, or so to speak, the animation, is that you get to see that movement and stuff that's not always, you know, super apparent in comics, but it's two different mediums, two different experiences for sure.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And even at the time, again, this is coming from watching that documentary just this week. Even at the time, there were people who were like, "Oh man, there are certain scenes in the manga that I cannot wait to see animated." Like that was one of the big selling points to this movie, just on home turf, you know.
I can get that. And then I don't know, maybe people wanted to see what a jacket with a big pill on the back looks like in animation rather than on the page.
Well, that's the name of their gang, right?
The pills.
It's it's not just pills. It's something.
The Allison Pill Gang.
It's
I
something
kind of get, yeah, I kind of get the idea that they were drug pushers because I mean, there's a lot of pills, a handful of pills being taken and stuff in this.
Mm-hmm.
I also do love going into a bar and just shouting at the owner that all of his stuff is crap and everyone in there is garbage.
Well, they do that all the time. Like even when they're all getting smacked at the school that they're at, and they're like, "You're an idiot. We hate you. We hate being here." Like it's just like constantly throwing vitriol at the people who are smacking them in the head. It's so funny.
And it's not just like I slapped you. Blood is coming out of every person when they just,
Yes.
I mean, they smack the ever-living crap out of these kids.
Something that I really think is kind of cool is we get a dystopian world where they don't feel like they have to point out just how dystopian it is. Like it's just there, and it's almost treated like, well, everybody knows what it's like in Neo Tokyo because, you know, you watch Mad Max movie or you watch one of the Hunger Games movies, like they got to point out just how dystopian, like you have to know every little detail of stuff. And here they're like, look, you'll just pick it up as we go along or it doesn't matter for this story.
Yeah, and it's like 30 years after that initial explosion and everything. So given these kids' age, they've known nothing but this.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess all of their parents maybe were had early deaths from radiation poisoning or something. I don't know, because it's also there's no answer as to why there's so many parentless children in this world.
That's what I took it as, is that these kids are survived or have survived their parents, if not, because this isn't the only school. I mean, this is why there's so many gangs in Neo Tokyo, is that there's many different schools. There's just Japanese newsies everywhere, you know, like they're just literally everywhere.
And it was interesting because it was a vocational school. So they, you know, really tried to like teach them, you know, some sort of trade or something that they can take out. But like the school is just so overrun and just crappy and everything. So you can't expect those kids to do, you know, super well in this horrible, horrible environment. And then when you're getting punched in the face by teachers, that don't help either.
Yeah. And then you also live at the school.
Yeah, well, you know, who doesn't want to live at school, right? It's a good time. Good time, schools. So let's talk a little bit about the this movie has had a long, giant history of trying to be made into a live-action film. Do you guys know enough about that? Or
I know a little bit about some of the more recent developments, but it seems like one of those things that's, you know, it's the gambit of anime. Like it's always in development. I don't know if it'll ever be made.
Yeah, and what I'm hoping for is that they learn with Ghost in the Shell that, look, just let this thing be this thing.
You don't want Scarlett Johansson in every role in this movie?
No, I do. I that's what I mean.
Scarlett Johansson is Tetsuro.
Oh man, and Ryan Gosling is the Solomon Grundy kids, all of them.
But it had been going on for quite some time. I guess Leonardo DiCaprio bought the rights to you know, put Akira on the big screen and everything for a long time, like over 20 years at this point. So he had like grown up watching it. He was a big fan of it and everything. Didn't want to be in it, but wanted to produce the movie itself. They've gone through a ton of different directors and stuff, and I
think the closest they came was Taika Waititi before he kind of broke big.
Yeah, he was scheduled to kind of do that before Love and Thunder hit really big. Then Love and Thunder, or excuse me, the Ragnarok rather, hit super big and stuff. And supposedly that may be still on the table and everything. They've been talking about different scripts and stuff. But Taika is also a fan of this and says, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. And I want to do it when the screenplay is set to go and really, you know, encompasses what I want to do. But Warner Brothers and stuff has done a lot of weird things in the past where this could have been set in California. It could have been set in New York. And these were all very real talks that they had.
Yeah.
And there was one guy, I forget the name of the writer who was doing it, but he did that the After Earth movie, and he was going to be the screenplay writer for this. And I was like, thank God, because that movie was terrible. I could only imagine how he would have taken this crazy, insane, intricate thing and just flattened it out to a big dumb pancake and said, "It's America." Oh, geez, what a mistake that would be.
And has Hollywood ever gotten manga right in live action?
Oh, did you see that Dragon Ball Z movie or both of them? Those were pretty good.
Were they live action?
They were live. There were 2 live action Dragon Ball Z movies. They're terrible.
I know about the one.
I did not know that, but I'll be right back.
Do yourself a favor. Don't, from what I'm to understand. My brother has watched.
You know what?
them
I just asked the question that I'm going to answer because I think Battle Angel Alita is great.
Yeah,
So
I would say
that's
that's
the one time that Hollywood's done it right. And you know, I like some non-Hollywood live action adaptations, but yeah, I think that's the only Hollywood one I could endorse.
Oh, and Forever and a Day, they said that Keanu Reeves was attached to this movie at some point. And I'm just like, when watching this, again, having not known anything going into the movie, I was really shocked to figure out that all of these kids are in high school, essentially. And I was like,
well, he would have played like the general.
Maybe. I'm watching, I'm like, do you really think you're going to put a 26-year-old, Keanu Reeves in this role? What a weird mistake. But again, it may have been part of those mini rewrites and stuff where it's not Neo Tokyo, it's Neo California or Manhattan, which were 2 different places that were thought of. And it's like, no.
You're looking at this totally wrong. You want him playing Canada at the age of a high schooler right now.
Yes. Now I can get into it because it's old enough that you got to be in on the joke. Right?
52-year-old Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
Right.
But when he's 26, people think maybe they're expecting you to buy he's 17.
Out of my way, old man. I'm 25.
Who you calling old? I can see the crow's feet on your face. Look at you. You're 90 years old. What are you talking about? I'm old. How many times you fail high school, you dumb kid? Shut up. It would have been awful. But yeah, all the other kids, though, would be young. You don't like, they're like 17, they're age appropriate, but Keanu Reeves is 52 years old.
Everybody keeps saying how when he grows up, look, when you grow up,
you're going to be big one day when you grow up and become an adult. I don't want any of your responsibilities, bro. Speeds off on a motorcycle.
So I got to say that when it comes to this movie, because something that we haven't talked about is all the pretenders to this, is that it seems like every couple of years, a new property will come out, manga or anime, where it's basically Akira. At least it feels that way to me, but it's not even close to being the same. It's like after Pulp Fiction came out, everybody in the world thought they could make Pulp Fiction and no one could make it.
Yeah. Hey, we're living in an era in which Bob Odenkirk has a John Wick movie. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
I am so looking forward to that movie. Don't you dare ruin it.
Everybody
I'm
says,
just saying that's what happens. Some things get imitators.
Everybody that's seen it has said that movie's fantastic. All that early buzz I've heard just says nothing but good things about that movie.
It's because of Odenkirk, baby.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
I'm impressed.
Odenkirk magic.
My 15-year-old daughter wants to see it, so you better believe we'll be seeing that first chance we get.
I'd love to go to Bob Odenkirk 20 years ago and just been like, did you know that like middle and high school kids are going to be like, I want to see that new Bob Odenkirk movie. He'd be like, get out of here.
If we really want to go deep dive on Odenkirk, I am more than willing to do that. We could turn this all into the Bob Odenkirk podcast, which again, I am totally fine with.
Not again.
He is my literally favorite comedic writer living right now. So if we can do that, but we should probably wrap up Akira.
So what you're saying is Bob Odenkirk is Tetsuo. I got it.
Yes, perfect.
Keanu Reeves is Canada.
Keanu Reeves is Canada. Yes.
Tetsuo's Bob Odenkirk.
The first version of this, it's still ingrained in my head. You have one of the Ninja Turtles, like the voice of the Ninja Turtles playing Canada, and at that point it was Canada, and even with that, it didn't offend me at all because I was watching the Turtles at the time, the cartoon. So I was like, oh sweet, they got the big guns. They brought in one of the Turtles to do Canada, and so it's Tetsuo and it's Akira and it's all of these voices, and so I'm trying very hard. So if I've offended anyone by butchering the names, please keep in mind that the dub did first.
Yeah, there's we can only pronounce the things if you hear the dubs. There's 2 ways you hear it. Maybe even more than that, but we know of at least 2 different dubs that are out there and stuff. But
I believe there's only 2, at least in America.
Yeah, 2 English language dubs.
I'll say this: the one that's on Hulu right now, pretty good. I
think it's as good as any dub I've ever seen.
Been super
But then
spoiled.
again, I'm not an aficionado.
I feel like I've been spoiled with a couple of good dubs lately. Usually, I like subtitles, and I started this one out. I'm like, I'll just see what the dub is. If the dub's garbage, I'll go over to subs. That's fine.
Can't imagine being able to follow this with just subs. I can't imagine it. There's way too much going on. It needs to be dubbed.
And you got to hear those crazy little creepy kid voices. Creepy kid voices. Oh my word, that's just drive me up a wall. Those little
yeah. I want to see how they pull that off in live action.
So scary. Well, before we get to our final ratings here and everything, we do have to ask ourselves one very important question: is how this movie, good luck, relates 1-to-1 with Sylvester Stallone.
Why, thank you, Adam. I have a prepared statement. Dan Warren worked in the sound department on Akira, but unfortunately, I don't know which dubbed version he was on. I'm going to guess it's the 1989 version because he was a sound editor in 1983 on the sequel to Saturday Night Fever, Staying Alive, which I guess everyone was asking for. I was alive then, but if it didn't have anything to do with Star Wars, that I wasn't paying any attention. And since you already know the name of this segment, I don't need to tell you who directed this movie. That's right. The world's greatest authority on professional dancing, Sylvester Stallone. And unless you produce a YouTube channel or a podcast that specializes in watching terrible movies, you've never actually seen this movie, and neither have I. Dan Warren would transition his career and become an actor and voiceover guy. If there's an animated property from Japan, chances are Dan Warren has worked on it. He's worked on Robotech, Dragon Ball, Cowboy Bebop, Trigun. He's still working, doing voices on Lupin the Third and Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. And if I ever meet the man, I'm going to shake his hand because he's this week's Stallone connection, and he totally saved my ass. And there you have it, HMPers and Dingalingers. This week's Stallone connection is voiceover guy, actor, and sound editor, Dan Warren. Adam and Bruce, this is the 348th episode of this bit, and still no word from Sylvester Stallone.
Tell you what, that Dan Warren guy sounds like he kind of kills it, man, all over the place. I love it. All right, let's get down to it here at Hero Movie Podcast. We have our own patented Robin rating system. If you'd like that, check out our subreddit, man, reddit.com/r/Hero Movie Podcast. It's right there at the top of the screen, and join along, why don't you? Bruce, where does Akira from 1988 fall on the Robin rating system for you?
Man, who am I to pass judgment on Akira? This thing is beloved. It's been around forever. You know, like I said before, people understand it. It's probably responsible for bringing a higher quality of anime to the West, you know, because it came first and other things were given an opportunity. But if you're going to rate it like just as an anime, it definitely gets 5 bamboo dongs. Like, is that good as far as an anime? If you're not familiar with anime, you're going to struggle with it a little bit, though, at times. So having said that, I'm going to say, like, for folks who don't really watch much anime like myself, it's going to be more in a Tim Drake area, but you got to make it to the end to really get that joy out of this.
5 bamboo dongs. Is that Larry Flint's anime review magazine?
No, man, that's a honest to goodness, I'm sure his mother gave him that name, anime writer on the internet.
He's prolific, if nothing else. Sean?
This is one of the movies that's just ingrained in my head. I can't see it for anything else than I saw it when I was a child. This is a Dick Grayson all day for me. I am not someone who loves when they start tinkering with the thing I love, but I have to say that the new dub version of Akira is far superior to the first one. And so if you're going to watch it, watch that one, which is the one that I believe is on Hulu, just from you guys glowing about it. It is not for everyone, this movie. No. There are people who are going to hate this movie, but I am not one of those people. It is a Dick Grayson for me.
For me, like I said, I outside of the iconography, I really didn't know what I was going to get when I was going in. For me, it wasn't a perfect experience. I think, like I said previously, I think the second act does drag a little bit, and I think that, from what I saw on the YouTube there, a lot of that does have to do with condensing down a whole bunch of story and just jam-packing it in there as best as they possibly can. I mean, this is a full 2-hour film and stuff, so they can only do so much with it, and it almost might make a more interesting, long-running series or something, which I'm quite frankly surprised they haven't done something like that. Because that's got to be way more achievable than a giant blockbuster movie. Which, by the way, guess what the lowest amount of money that they had put aside for this movie at one point? It'll blow your mind.
$100,000.
$60 million was it.
Oh, I was way off.
That was like the highest. That was like the lowest, because this movie. If you made this movie, just a live action version of this, that cost $300 million easy. There's just so much going on there. So the fact that at one point they were like, well, we can do it for 60. Wait, in what planet? You're out of your mind.
You're not doing that.
That's so nuts. So I'm glad that it hasn't. I'm glad that it is still in this form and it is pure for us to check out. But like I said, man, when we got to that third act, it really just blew me away. And it made everything worth it. It made that second half that was a little bit dreary, a little bit slow. Boy, does it keep going and piling up and up and up, and I really enjoyed it. Right now, I'm going to give it a Tim Drake, but I feel upon subsequent viewings, because like Sean said, there's a lot of stuff going on here that you're probably not going to get the first time, and you're certainly not going to see everything the first time because there's so much in every single frame of this that I'm going to go Tim Drake just so I can have the ability to jump up to a Dick Grayson on subsequent viewings, which I'm definitely going to do at some point because this is quite good. Very, very impressed. And big giant thank you to everyone who voted for this bad boy over at patreon.com/HMP. Again, they are the lifeblood of this show, man. You guys keep supporting us and getting extra stuff at the exact same time, so you certainly can't lose with all of that. Well, we've got more coming for you next week. I'll tell you about that in just a second. In the meantime, Bruce, where can we find more of your work on the internet?
I'm still asking people to please check out my YouTube channel. I'm always needing subscribers. Last week, I had a video with the top 10 doctors in comics. Just today, I uploaded my first impressions on the Invincible animated series, as well as some thoughts on Falcon and Winter Soldier. And coming up later this week will be a Flag Smasher episode. So go check it out, youtube.com/C/Bruce Leslie.
And if you can't remember that, the link for it is right there in the show notes. Boom! How about that? Sean, what else?
Oh, boy, do we have a lot of podcasts that we do. We're about to tape another episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, 30 Questions. I don't know what the actual name of that podcast is called. Is it Marvel 30 Questions?
Well, it'll just be, we'll change the name proper. It's just going to be under Marvel 30 Questions. That's just the banner that we're putting all this under, but we'll change the main name for it. So you can just look up Falcon and the Winter Soldier or just Row Boys in general, ROBOYS, and that'll pull up every single podcast that we do under our umbrella. Isn't that nice?
Very good. I'm not even giving you crap for that, Adam. That is a very difficult ship to steer. So thank you for doing that. And also, I wanted to just personally thank the HMPers for this month. Usually it seems like you guys vote on things just to make us miserable. And you like to hear me specifically complain about the terribleness of the thing we're watching. This month, I just felt the love with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Akira. This has been a really wonderful month to be part of this show. So thank you very much, guys. This was a joy.
All the comments in the polls were just like, oh boy, Sean's going to have a time with this one. Shows what you people know.
I totally understand it because all I do is complain about bad animation. But that's the thing, is that I complain about bad animation, not good animation. Yeah. I love things that are lovely. And this is one of those moments, man. I love Akira.
We all get fun surprise every week. And next week, we got another surprise for you because we're heading back out. You can do it in the movie theater or on home. We're talking about Godzilla versus King Kong, or Kong versus Godzilla. Depends on who your champion is. I've got my IMAX ticket already, so I'm excited for this one. So join us back here next week for that one. That is it, everybody. Join us one more time here for Sweet Sean's Cove Action on the Internet. Bruce Leslie, I'm Adam Portress. Stay super, everybody.
Bye, Marty and Evie.
She's hard to get started, she's always so cold. In the mornings I find her, she's looking so old. So many miles, we've been down that road once or twice. She's not much to look at when we ride through town, but I know when the chips fall she won't let me down. She knows when to run and she don't run around on her man. She's a high-flying lady, she takes me where I want to be. There's no other woman standing between her and me. I'll always be faithful and keep her till the end of time. God knows I'll always love that old panhead of mine. I've seen fancy dressers and they've caught my eye. I've rode 'em to ride 'em and told 'em goodbye. I've flirted with low riders, sportsters, and shovelheads too. I've cussed her and beat her and kicked her to just get her started a couple of times. You might think I'm crazy, but I love that pinhead of mine. She's a high-flying lady, she takes me where I want to be. There's no other woman standing between her and me. I'll always be faithful, I keep her till the end of time. God knows I'll always